English vibe. Yeah. Easy English vibe.
Picture this. You are in a bustling cafe in Rome, or maybe a quiet noodle shop in Tokyo. You've done your homework. You have memorized that one specific sentence from page 12 of your guidebook perfectly. You walk up to the counter, you take a deep breath, and you say, "Excuse me, my good sir, I would like to purchase one portion of your finest coffee, please."
And the barista looks at you like you just landed from Mars.
Exactly. They blink, maybe they smirk, and suddenly that barrier you were trying to break down, it's twice as high. Welcome to the podcast. I'm Noah.
And I'm Eloise.
Today, we are dissecting a phenomenon that ruins more trips than bad weather or lost luggage. We're talking about tourist English, or really, tourist language in general. It's that stiff, robotic, unnatural way we are taught to speak when we travel. And we're asking, why do we do this? And how can we stop sounding like walking textbooks?
It's a fascinating topic because it touches on history, sociology, and the weird psychology of being a stranger in a strange land. We think we're being polite, but we're actually engaging in a very specific, very outdated performance.
Let's start with that performance, because it feels safe, right? The phrase book gives you a script. Where is the library? How much does this cost? But Eloise, when you dig into the history of these scripts, they weren't exactly written for modern backpackers, were they?
Not at all. If you look at the genealogy of the travel guide, you have to go back to the Grand Tour era, largely in the 18th and 19th centuries. We see early examples like Thomas West's Guide to the Lake District in 1778, which popularized the idea of viewing stations, literally telling people where to stand to see the landscape correctly. But the language guides that followed for international travel had a very specific social assumption baked into them.
Which was?
That the traveler was a wealthy master and the local was a servant. The phrases weren't about connection, they were commands. Take my trunk to the carriage. Prepare my bath. This soup is cold. They were purely functional, designed to extract service from a compliant local population. When we use those stiff full-sentence structures today, I would like to have the check, please. We are unknowingly echoing that Victorian power dynamic. We sound authoritative, but also incredibly distant.
That creates such a weird friction, because today I'm not a Victorian lord. I'm just a guy trying to get an espresso without looking like an idiot. But the tool I'm using, this formal language, is actively preventing me from connecting.
Right, and this brings us to a core concept in sociolinguistics, the difference between transactional and interactional communication. Scholars and linguists distinguish these sharply. Transactional communication is purely about the exchange of goods or information. It's give me the bread, here is the money. It is result-oriented.
Which is basically 99% of a phrase book.
Precisely. But interactional communication is about maintaining social relationships. It's the, hey, how's it going? Or cold one today, huh? It's the social glue. The problem is that tourists are armed almost exclusively with transactional weapons. They walk into a space that relies on interactional vibes, like a friendly local pub, and they drop a heavy transactional sentence on the table. It kills the mood immediately.
It's like walking into a party and shouting, "I require a beverage," instead of just nodding at someone and saying, "Beer?"
That is a perfect analogy, and recent research into English as a lingua franca, or ELF, in tourism shows that this gap is widening. We see that English has become the default language of global tourism, fueled originally by the British Empire and then supercharged by American cultural dominance post-World War II. But the English used in tourism isn't real English. It's a sanitized, stripped-down version that exists only in hotels and airports.
So we have this tourist English, which is basically a fake language that everyone agrees to use, but nobody actually speaks at home.
Yes, it's an artificial construct, and when you use it, you are signaling, I am not a person, I am a customer. You are defining the relationship instantly as financial rather than human. That's why it feels so cold.
Okay, so let's get technical for a second. What specifically makes these phrases sound so unnatural? Is it just the vocabulary, or is it the structure?
It's the lack of reduction. Native speakers of any language, English, Spanish, Japanese, don't speak in full grammatical sentences in casual settings. We use fragments. We use ellipsis. If you go to a coffee shop in New York, you don't say, hello, I would like a small coffee. You say, small coffee, please, or even just black small. The tourist phrasebook, however, insists on the subject-verb-object perfection. I would like to buy a ticket.
It's the uncanny valley of language. It's too perfect, so it sounds fake.
Exactly. And it's exhausting for the listener. Imagine being a ticket agent in Paris. You hear 500 people a day struggling through a 10-word sentence when 2 words would do. Deux billets, 2 tickets, is infinitely better than a mangled paragraph-long attempt at politeness. Efficiency is actually a form of politeness in busy cities.
That's a huge mental shift. We're taught that more words equals more polite. You're saying that in a travel context, brevity might actually be more respectful of the locals' time.
It is, but there's a nuance here. You can't just bark, coffee, that's rude. You need what linguists call phatic expressions. These are the little verbal nods that don't carry information, but signal, I see you, I respect you. In France, for example, the bonjour is non-negotiable. You can't skip the greeting. But after the greeting, you can be brief. The mistake tourists make is skipping the bonjour, the human acknowledgement, and then being overly wordy with the order.
I see. So the rookie moves are ignore the human, but over-explain the transaction. The pro move is acknowledge the human, simplify the transaction.
Perfectly summarized. And this brings up a massive source of cultural friction, the script of service encounters. Every culture has a script for how you buy something. In the US, the script often involves fake friendship. Hi, how are you today? Great, I'll have the latte. In Germany or Russia, that script is considered intrusive or superficial. The script there is efficient. Greeting, order, payment, goodbye. When an American tourist tries to run their buddy-buddy script in a culture that values privacy and efficiency, they are viewed as obnoxious, not friendly.
I've definitely felt that. I remember trying to chat up a cashier in Berlin and getting a stare that could freeze water. I thought I was being a good tourist.
But you were breaking their script. You were forcing them into an interactional mode when they were in a transactional space. It's a form of labor you're forcing onto them. And this is where the English lingua franca issue gets tricky. Because English is the global language of tourism, locals in tourist hotspots are constantly forced to accommodate us. They have to code switch into English, adopt our scripts, and tolerate our clumsiness. Sociolinguists point out that this creates an asymmetry. The guest holds the power, the host does the work.
That's a heavy realization. We think we're the ones struggling because we can't read the menu, but actually, the local staff is doing the heavy lifting of cultural translation every single time.
Yes, and that's why moving away from tourist phrases is actually an ethical choice, not just a stylistic one. When you stop using those canned, demanding sentences and start observing how locals actually interact, you are trying to meet them halfway. You are observing their script.
So let's get practical. If we're tossing the phrase book into the recycling bin, what replaces it? How do I prepare for a trip to, say, Thailand or Portugal if I don't speak the language?
You focus on three things: the greeting, the gratitude, and the softeners. You don't need to know how to conjugate to be in the past tense. You need to know the local equivalent of excuse me or sorry. These are the softeners. If you approach someone and say sorry English with a humble body language, that is infinitely better than walking up and launching into a rehearsed speech. It acknowledges your deficit.
It lowers the status. It says, I'm the one who doesn't know what's going on here.
Exactly. It flips that Victorian master-servant dynamic we talked about earlier. You are making yourself vulnerable. And then use nouns. Don't worry about sentences. Train station, with a rising intonation, is universally understood. I am looking for the location of the railway station is a cognitive burden for everyone involved.
And nouns are easier to pronounce. I feel like half the time I butcher a sentence, it's because the grammar gets me twisted up. If I just have to nail the word station, I could probably do that.
And there is another layer here, the nonverbal. We forget that communication is largely nonverbal. In high-context cultures like Japan or many parts of the Middle East, silence and gesture carry more weight than words. A slight bow, a hand on the chest, a smile, these often replace the need for those please and thank you phrases we obsess over. A phrasebook can't teach you that. Observation does.
It sounds like we need to stop trying to be speakers of the language and start being users of the communication tools available, which includes our hands, our eyes, and our attitude.
That's a great distinction. A speaker is trying to replicate a native grammar. A user is just trying to connect. And the irony is, the less you try to perform perfect language, the more authentic the interaction often feels. You're no longer hiding behind the script.
I want to go back to something you mentioned about the tourist gaze extending to language. We usually talk about the tourist gaze in terms of sightseeing. We look at the Eiffel Tower, we consume the view. How are we consuming language?
Well, think about how we treat local greetings. We often treat them like souvenirs. We sprinkle a ciao or a namaste into our conversation, not because it aids communication, but because it makes us feel exotic or worldly. It's decorative. Sociologists argue that this commodifies the local culture. We take the shiny bits, the greetings, the toasts, and we discard the complex, messy reality of the actual language. It's linguistic tourism.
That stings a little. I'm definitely guilty of the decorative ciao.
We all are, and it's not inherently evil, but it becomes problematic when we think that saying ciao means we understand Italian culture. It's the surface level. True understanding comes when you realize that in some cultures, you don't say thank you to close friends because it implies distance, or that in others, refusing a gift 3 times is the standard script before accepting. Those are the deep linguistic currents that a phrasebook will never show you.
So, if we zoom out, what is the legacy of this tourist English? Is it creating a global monoculture where everyone just speaks this broken, transactional, basic English?
There is a fear of that. Some linguists worry about that steamroller effect of English, but I'm a bit more optimistic. I think we're seeing a shift where travelers are becoming more savvy. Translation apps, ironically, help with this. Because the phone handles the transaction, the human is free to handle the interaction. You can show the screen for the complex stuff, which leaves you free to smile, make eye contact, and share a moment.
That's a really interesting take. The technology handles the Victorian command, I want the soup, so I can just be the human being.
Exactly. We are outsourcing the transactional so we can reclaim the interactional. That might be the future of travel communication. Less talking, more connecting.
I love that. So the takeaway for our listeners next time they pack their bags, leave the phrasebook on the shelf, or at least don't treat it like a Bible. Learn the greeting, learn the apology, and then just be a human being. Watch, listen, and drop the full sentences.
And don't be afraid to be imperfect. The vulnerability of not knowing is often the bridge to a real connection.
Eloise, thank you for walking us through the linguistics of being a better traveler.
Happy travels, everyone. Keep it short.